All right, everybody, welcome back to Load the Box. I am your host, Jordan Hawthorne. I am joined, as always, by my marvelous co-host, who is back from his week-long vacation to undisclosed locations. Will Goodwin, ladies and gentlemen, looking. I'm gonna be honest, and this might sound like an insult. The camera's not picking up any significant tanning.
It's
Which is
unfortunate.
unfortunate. It is unfortunate, but I'm sure that face to face in person, I mean, just a golden bonds.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
let's just say the undisclosed location was not the Caribbean or the Atlantic Ocean. It was still summer where we were, but it was not a place where bronze beauties show up. So
No, that's definitely fair. Yeah, I mean, it is as I put in the tweet on Monday, which is the day that we're recording this. It is a football podcast in the end of June, about to be the beginning of July. My mind personally is on my Cincinnati Reds, who I almost abandoned for the Chicago White Sox. Decided to stick on them for another year. Picked a good year to stick on them.
that was, as I mentioned to you the other day, that was borderline the worst decision you could have ever made.
Yeah, that could have been a bad one.
The White Sox are currently, I think, 13 or 14 games under 500. The Reds are in first place and on a tear, and y'all are sitting pretty over there in Cincinnati. So congratulations to you for sticking with your team. I kind of knew you would, to be honest. I didn't really think you'd abandon them for the tumultuous Southsiders.
There's that cool factor that the White Sox have, like they used to have. I don't know if they still do. A lot of 90s rappers would wear the White Sox hats and stuff.
Yep.
But, yeah, man, went to two Reds games this week, one of which was on Wednesday at noon. And it was like, even on Wednesday at noon, there were like 26,000 people filled in GABP, which
awesome.
you have famously underrated that ballpark. It's such a nice ballpark. But and then it was a sellout all weekend long against Atlanta. Ellie De La Cruz hit for the first cycle since 1989. So 8 years.
You didn't see that live, did you?
I did not see that live. What's funny is we were going to go to that game because that June 23rd has some family significance in Delaney's family, and so we were going to go to that game to attempt to force Delaney to go into labor on June 23rd. It did not end up happening. We went the day after. I watched it live though. It was man. It was exciting. But like I said, to get back on track, it's a football podcast in July. I mean, there's not a ton happening. The draft is over. Mini camp is over. We'll start getting into training camp and preseason, here coming up. But right now we have three topics to talk about today. Last is mini camp. Second to last, we'll talk about Danielle Hunter in a little bit. Let's kick it off with the Dalvin Cook news. Dalvin Cook no longer a member of the Minnesota Vikings roster. A lot of people saw this coming. Some people thought we would get some trade value, but I think the writing was on the wall across the league that if you wanted Dalvin Cook, you just had to wait until the beginning of June when the Vikings would part ways with him. Now he's looking to sign with DeAndre Hopkins as a package deal, which is kind of funny to me. So we'll see what ends up happening with Dalvin's career. I'm sure that he'll make the Vikings look foolish for a couple of seasons. I do think he still has some gas in the tank. We're not talking about, Adrian Peterson, who's only going to be able to run for maybe 400 or 500 yards. I think I might have lost Will. But I do think that the Vikings made the correct decision in, pouting ways.
I lost audio. I'm back now.
Okay, you are back now?
I can hear you now.
Oh,
I missed everything after the DeAndre Hopkins Dalvin Cook package deal.
I saw you pointing at your headphones, so I just started going into my take, which is I think Cook is gonna make the Vikings look kind of foolish, for maybe this year or next year, but I do think the Vikings saved obviously a lot of money by letting him go now, and they also I think made the right decision. You know, you always want to get out early, you know, a year early than a year late. And we're not talking about, you know, Cook has a lot left in the tank. It's not like whenever we, you know, parted ways with Adrian Peterson and he went on to rush for like 300 yards for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss Dalvin. I think that you can almost single-handedly... Dalvin Cook, maybe you could say, won us the game against the Colts and the Bills. Like, the two comeback games kind of had a Dalvin Cook play that, you know, if anybody else is in there, maybe they don't have the speed to make that play. We'll see what happens this season, another year within the O'Connell system and everything. But I have faith in Madison, Chandler, you know, the committee of running backs that we're going to see this season. And, you know, O'Connell comes from that Los Angeles Rams style of like, it's Cam Akers, it's, you know, this guy. It kind of feels like the NFL is off of the dedicated high-paid running back train, and they are on to the committee of cheap guys. Find a guy in the 7th round. I mean, look at I said this a month ago whenever we did our last show, but you look at the running backs in the Super Bowl, it was 7th rounder Isaiah Pacheco and Miles Sanders and some other guys for Philly. So I mean, I want to say that it's going to be this massive hole left on the team. I don't think it will be. But I will miss Dalvin Cook, and I wish him all the best.
Yeah, it's like you said, the writing was on the wall with this, and I think the Vikings held out as long as they could, as long as they felt they could, to try and get something back from Dalvin Cook. But it's pretty clear that no team wanted to pay him what he was owed. He was owed $11 million for this season, and the Vikings couldn't get a trade partner. And it's pretty clear because now, you know, there were reports that Cook was looking for somewhere in the $10 million range this year after being cut, and no one signed him yet. So that's sort of, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. No one wanted to take on that contract from Dalvin Cook, and so he still remains unsigned. I mean, the other part of the equation here is that he's willing to be patient. I don't think he is necessarily trying to force his way onto a team in the next week or anything. I think he's willing to be patient and wait for the right situation. Obviously, Miami had been floated out there. You mentioned the DeAndre Hopkins connection. So who knows where he ends up? I mean, obviously, it's going to be weird not seeing him line up in the backfield because he's been a mainstay for the offense for the last 6 years, and a very productive one. Even despite the injuries, he's been very productive. I think the important thing to note, and, you know, this is sort of old news now, right, is 2 or 3 weeks old already at this point, but the biggest thing here was not simply the Vikings not liking Cook or souring on Cook. It was simply a math equation. And as I mentioned, he was owed $11 million. His cap hit was around $14 million. But this season, the Vikings had an out in his contract to save them $9 million of cap space. And so you look at it that way, if they would have waited an extra year, they wouldn't have been able to save that money, et cetera, et cetera. And so the decision to cut him was becoming financial for an aging running back, as you mentioned, in a league where teams don't pay running backs $10 million anymore.
Right.
So it is where it is now for Cook. As you mentioned, I mean, watching him last year, it was clear he was not the same in terms of, you know, immediate burst or physicality, but he still had it. He still showed moments of it. That catch against Washington in the back of the end zone, that wild one-handed catch. He had the Miami touchdown that iced the game down there. So he definitely contributed greatly to a very successful Vikings season. But I was definitely in the camp of it's time for the painful ripping off of the Band-Aid. These things have to happen eventually. The previous regime signed him to a bad contract, and the new regime had to do something about it. And so sort of with this, you know, the rebuild, part of the competitive rebuild, you have to do things like this in order to stay viable. So I think most folks agree it was probably the right move. And now we move on. Like you mentioned, Ty Chandler, Alexander Madison. I think we're going to be all very interested to see what Dwayne McBride can do in the preseason. training camp. Kene Nwangwu's still there. I know he hasn't got many snaps offensively, but I do think he is someone that they could leverage at times if you're looking for that speed guy. Use him as a guy who can catch screen passes, things like that. So I don't think their options are limited now at running back. They're paying 4 guys, I think, less than what Cook was making by himself. I could be wrong on the specific numbers there, but Madison's the highest paid, and he's making about $4 million. So, so there you go. New running back.
I think the Vikings sent a pretty clear message to the fans, to the NFL, to everybody. They took a wide receiver with the first pick. They had one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year. They took a wide receiver with the first round pick. I think that this offense goes through the right arm of Kirk Cousins. I'm excited to see his Netflix documentary, with him and is it Brady? Oh no, it's him,
Mahomes and Mariota.
I was gonna say there's some like journeyman that's in there because I know it's like the top echelon, the mid guy, and then the backup journeyman guy. Yeah. So I'm excited for that to come out. But it does feel like this offense is Kirk Cousins' offense, and this team is gonna offensively anyway live and die by his performance this season. And as someone who has been questionably faithful to Kirk Cousins, I've not been the best fan of my quarterback. That's scary to me, but he showed me enough last year. It was like, you know what? Let's see it. Like, we didn't commit to him. There's still no contract extension for Cousins. Let's see what the offense looks like. He's not going to have maybe as strong of a running game as he's had in the past. I don't think you can question that these. I don't know. Maybe you could say that like his first couple years in Minnesota with Diggs and Thielen, that was a better receiving core than what Jefferson and Addison is, because we don't know what Addison is yet. But he also has, I almost said Tyler Conklin. That would have been funny. Thank you. He also has the Hawk, as my family refers to him as. That's another weapon. So the offense has a plethora of weapons. I think that offensively we'll be just fine. But let's shift the focus here. Let's go over to the defense that was so bad last season. And they were bad last season with Danielle Hunter, playing on it. Now, granted, they didn't have a secondary, and they had a defensive coordinator that was afraid of everything. It kind of felt like he was just playing to not give up a 75-yard touchdown, and it's, that was we pointed out the flaws week after week last year, as everyone with a brain did. I don't know how Donatel didn't adjust, but it is what it is. So, Danielle Hunter, not at minicamp. Don't know that he'll be at training camp. He's in a holdout. He's not set to make a lot of money. He is technically under contract, but this was the year it was like, hey, if he's doing bad, cut ties with him. If he's, if he got banged up again, cut ties with him. He wouldn't make that much money anyway. And if he does really well, pay the man. And he played pretty well. So we are now at an impasse. Trade or pay. Those are kind of the options on the table. Latest reports I saw, the Vikings were hanging up on people that wanted to trade for Danielle. They weren't physically hanging up, but they were saying, like, well, it's not on the table. What do you think happens? And put yourself in Kwesi's shoes. Do you sign Danielle Hunter to like maybe not even a long-term deal, but do you make him one of the higher-paid edge rushers in the league, or do you explore a trade option? And if so, what's your price? That was like 8 questions, I know.
I would explore the trade market. Granted, if he's not taking calls on it seriously, then that sort of, is a moot point. Just because from my perspective, Danielle Hunter hasn't done enough recently to warrant a big contract. He's been a good player. He was a good player last year. But the year prior, he played not even half the season. The year before that, he didn't play at all. And the year before that, I believe, I'm trying to even remember these years now, stacking them on top of each other. 2019, I believe he had a good season, but that's 4 years ago. And how much can you ask of a guy who really hasn't had, a signature season in about 4 years? Again, he was good and he was healthy last year, but back-to-back years basically being completely out by injury, that worries me. And so I would be very, very hesitant to pay top dollar for him, especially considering what the Vikings just did in cutting contracts that were expensive and bloated. It seems sort of counter to that philosophy of getting valuable assets. Kwesi talks always about value and going after things that have high value. And I personally do not see that with Danielle Hunter. I think I want to see that with Danielle Hunter because of what he did show back when Everson Griffin was lining up on the opposite side. But that was so long ago that I struggle to see that being a reality again.
Yeah.
So, and that's probably, where the impasse is right now, frankly, because if the Vikings were willing to pay him big money, he probably would have already signed by now. I would imagine that the Vikings are lowballing him in his opinion, and he's not willing to take their lowball. So that's where I would start looking at trades. But again, if Kwesi's not doing that, then I guess you start trying to have a negotiation, which I'm sure they're doing. In your opinion, if they were to trade, I know you asked for the price. I'd probably ask for like a, second round pick for him or something like that.
As a negotiator, my price starts at 2 1s. Like this, coming up
Sure.
1 and 3 years from now 1. It starts somewhere in that range. You talk me down, I would be satisfied if the Vikings announced that they have traded Danielle Hunter for a second round pick, and maybe they then within 3 hours they announced the signing of Yannick Ngakoue. That would be my trade off. Is you go sign Yannick, you bring him home, which is odd to say you bring him home whenever he played like 6 games for the Vikings, but you bring Yannick. I think
he led the team in sacks that year.
He did lead the team in sacks that year in 6 games. So you bring Yannick the freaking Ngakoue back, and you trade Danielle. You end up getting a second. Maybe you do get a first round pick from a team. I'm gonna float it like Cincinnati. Oh, the Chiefs. You send them to the AFC to a team, the Bills. I'm just throwing out the teams in the AFC that are contending, that could use his presence now. You try and get their late first-round pick, and then this also puts the Vikings in a situation where if you do trade him, and now you find yourself with 2 first-round picks next season, let's say Cousins has an all-right season, but, I don't know, he checks down on the last play of the season. Hypothetical. He throws a check down on a 4th down in the wild card round. Let's just say he does that. Then you have the ammunition to move up in the draft, to try and get one of these, premier quarterback prospects, the Drake May, the Caleb Williams, et cetera. So I think that would be ideal for me. It almost turns into you're trading a first-round pick and Danielle, to move up in the draft, which I don't think a lot of people would have been mad at if they would have done this draft, if they would have moved up, if they really liked, I don't want to say Will Levis, but if they really liked somebody up in that, top, if they liked CJ Stroud.
If they really wanted to go for Anthony Richardson, there were, rumors about, that would have been possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you kind of use that ammunition, you move up into the, let's say the top 7, and then you get your guy and you move on. And it kind of feels like they are going to move on. I hate to talk about Cousins. Cousins has done nothing. It is it's June, the end of June. Cousins, and even the check down, I've said multiple times, and I'll say it again, this is my new catchphrase now that I can't say this is when, Super Bowls are won, because we're really not in the offseason so much, like the exciting part anyway, but bad play call by O'Connell. Awful play call, but sorry Cousins for the hate. But yeah, Yannick Ngakoue needs to be a Viking. Danielle Hunter, I think we both agree should be traded. I'm afraid what is happening is Spielman signed him to that very lengthy, very budget team deal. And there was kind of an understanding, I think, that you're going to continue to dominate, and we are going to pay you heavily once you as you keep dominating. But we want to build a Super Bowl roster around you. And so I think that was kind of the understanding. Now there's a new boss in town, and he's been injured, and he hasn't had that 22 sack season.
Yeah.
And so now he's saying, okay, I took less money for the team. Now's when I get paid. And Kwesi's saying, I never did that under the table handshake. That wasn't me. That was the last guy. The last guy got ran out of town. Sorry about it. This is what you're worth. And I think that's how the negotiations are going. And to me, that has trade written all over it. Because it feels like they're very far apart in terms of trade. Do you have anything else on the Danielle front?
I was just going to say, who do you think steps up if Danielle is not back next year?
Oh, man.
Assuming we don't get someone like Ngakoue.
Yeah, if we're
and we're sort of stuck with what we have.
If we're looking at the roster as constructed, I mean, like, I want to say DJ Wanham, but is the DJ Wanham hype train still running? Is it like, I mean, it feels like it's running out of steam. So maybe it's a guy like Patrick Jones. It's one of the edge rushers that we took late last season. Maybe a guy like Andre Cardo comes in and impresses in a mini camp and a training camp and makes the team and starts making impact as a rookie. The reason that I have been historically very team pay Danielle is because I already feel as though there are a lot of question marks on this defense. And Danielle feels like the one spot where you're like, that's 10 sacks, roughly, give or take. And that's consistent pressure, and that's a guy that you depend on. You not depend on, but that's a not question mark, right? And so to get rid of that, and now to be like, okay, we don't know who's going after the quarterback. We don't know who's stopping the pass. We don't know who's, stopping the run. We know we have Harrison Smith. That's the one thing we know at that point. And we even don't know that because he's old enough now.
Yep.
You have to wonder if he is hitting the proverbial cliff, and if he's going to have a really bad season where he's just too slow. So it's man, I don't know. It's scary to think of a team without Danielle because, like I said, he kind of is the one non-question mark on this defense. And so this defense might just be a complete, who knows? We'll go into week 1 saying we think it's good on paper. It looked good in preseason. We like I like Asamoah in theory. I don't know if he can play Stouter snaps and play at a high enough level to make the defense better. And then it really is just a blind faith in Brian Flores and his ability to call a defense. I mean, that's really what it is. Who do you think, if you had to give like a name, I mean, who do you think it would be?
My sleeper for this summer is Patrick Jones. There's a piece out on VikingsTerritory.com that Dustin Baker put together with a bunch of the writers, and the guy that I sort of labeled as that, surprise contender, if you will, or the guy who's going to make some noise in training camp in the preseason was Jones. I liked what I saw from him last year. I think he showed marked improvement in terms of his aggressiveness, his ability to sniff out the run game. He had moments, like flash moments of getting to the passer. He had that 2-sack game in Miami. So I think, and him and Wanham both only had 4 sacks last year. It's not like either of them were, pushing people around all season. But in terms of, athletic ability and ferociousness, frankly, I like what Patrick Jones brought to the table. And so if there had to be someone, I would look to him. I do like your mention of Andre Carter. I almost forgot about the rookies and everybody who are coming in here. And Andre Carter is a guy who's got to prove himself, and he's an undrafted guy this year and all that. But like you mentioned, we're sort of having a blind faith in Brian Flores. I do think that there is some merit to that. But again, a defensive coordinator can only do with what he has. And so I will be very interested to see what this defense becomes into this next season if there are no new additions. We've talked a lot about, we and other people have talked a lot about the aggressiveness that Brian Flores likes to play with. Aggressive but not reckless, I believe, was what he said. And it's really hard to be an aggressive defense when you can't get to the quarterback.
Yep.
Because you're going to get burned a lot. It's just the way it is. You can only defend for so long on the back end, and quarterbacks who can extend plays are going to make your life a nightmare. And so if you can't get to the quarterback with, 4 or 5 guys, you're going to be in the trouble in the back end. Yes, you can bring pressure. Yes, you can simulate pressure. But those pressures and simulated pressures from linebackers or the secondary only work if you're able to get to the quarterback from the defensive front. And so there's got to be some level of pressure generated. And again, it's a lot of conjecture. It's hard to really posit at this point because we haven't seen these guys play in Flores's defense, but we have seen these guys play. And so there is a level of understanding of what they can bring to the table. And I think there's reasonable skepticism about how effective the defense can be, regardless of how good Brian Flores is.
Yeah.
So going out and getting somebody like Ngakoue could be a reasonable addition. But then again, you're talking about, and then we get into the whole idea of what O'Connell and Kwesi think of this team, and if this is a team that's worth really investing in, or if it's better to develop guys for next year. I personally believe this is a team that can compete to win the division again, but if O'Connell and company are not as high on them, especially if a departure from Hunter happens, then maybe they ride with the guys they have, and it'd be a lot more interesting. It would be also potentially more frustrating to watch.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous proposition to chalk this year up as like, okay, this one's kind of
absolutely not.
Let some guys develop and, another year. Like everybody gets a year older, and you're probably going to lose Cousins, probably.
Yeah.
Or you're going to end up paying him a lot more, which is going to piss off a lot of people. And also, like, there's no guarantees, even if Brian Flores is, the DC of the 30th best defense in the NFL, and the Vikings defense is terrible. There's no guarantees somebody doesn't give him a job based off of his track record, his experience as a head coach. And so there's a chance that this is still a one and done for Brian Flores, no matter how good or bad the defense is.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would disagree if the thought process behind this season is kind of like okay, we'll try to be competitive, but if we're not going to put the pieces in play to go try to win a championship, we'll just, wild card loss is fine with us. That can't be the mindset, in my opinion. And I kind of had a theory about, the reason they were cutting Cook was because they wanted money for this year. They wanted to put some chips in on the table. And I kind of floated Ndamukong Suh a month ago as just like look, maybe they want to add a guy in the middle. They want to bring in a big name like Ndamukong Suh. And I just brought that up, because he was kind of he's a big name free agent, but he's kind of older. You brought up maybe they want to free the money up so they can pay Danielle. Or maybe they want to free the money up so they can pay Jefferson. There's definitely an impasse here. And I guess we should very quickly kind of touch on minicamp. I do think Jefferson did show up. He did.
He was there.
He came.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm going to now, put the proverbial. This is violent, but I'm going to put the metaphorical gun to your head here, and I'll point it at the. Maybe there it is. I'm going to put the gun to your head. Say the take that you have on why Jefferson wasn't there, and the whole Cousins and the contract, and I think that's an A++ take that needs to be spoken into the world. Do you know what I'm referencing?
Yes, and after digging a little bit more into it, I'm not sure it holds as much water as it did originally. I'll say what I was thinking, but I do think it maybe is a little bit less less strong. So I was thinking that, Jefferson not showing up to voluntary, so not mandatory, OTAs really was much to do about nothing. Jefferson is now entering his 4th season. He just won Offensive Player of the Year. He's got the same offensive staff. He's got the same quarterback. He's super popular. He's got a lot of, as he said, endorsements. That was one of the reasons why he cited why he was not at OTAs. He's got a lot of things that, guys entering their 4th year of their rookie deal don't normally have. And frankly, he didn't need to show up. And I think that part is probably true. He didn't really need to show up. Now, personally, I would have liked him to show up for the sake of Jordan Addison, and just continuing to build the rapport there. I think showing up generally would be a good idea, but not showing up is not the end of the world either. My thing was, sort of pushing back on the idea that Jefferson was doing sort of a soft holdout of OTAs because he's waiting for a contract. I don't necessarily agree with that, or at least I didn't, based on the sense that Jefferson wants to see what this current team, does, and he wants to see if, frankly, what they're going to do at quarterback moving forward. Jefferson has often talked about the idea of winning Super Bowls. He famously said last season he is not too fond of money and that these big contracts are not the thing that he thinks about the most. Taking that at face value, to Jefferson, winning is more important than money. And so if he doesn't believe that this franchise is the place where he can win, I could see him saying, why do I want a big contract here? I'd rather play out my rookie contract and go somewhere else. Especially if Cousins is gone and Jaren Hall is not the guy, and maybe they don't get a rookie quarterback next year to step into their place, like you mentioned, Caleb Williams, or Drake May, one of those highly touted guys. So basically, if Jefferson doesn't see that the team is ready to win and that they don't have a good quarterback set in place, maybe he's ready just to go after these next 2 seasons. However, the reason why this argument doesn't necessarily work anymore is that I realize that the Vikings have the ability to franchise tag him twice. And Ben Gessling pointed that out a couple weeks ago on his podcast, and that's when I was reminded, he can't necessarily just wait around and then, walk as a free agent. He could, but you would imagine the Vikings would tag him.
Yeah. He'll be a Viking until 2026, basically.
Yeah, and at that point, if you're Jefferson, you're sort of, your entire prime is sort of going to be with purple anyways.
I don't know, man. I think he'd only be like 27 in 2026.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I think it still holds some weight, but I also think the Vikings will have an answer that satisfies his conundrum of who's throwing me the ball. I think that they will have an answer because the Vikings historically find an answer at quarterback. It's not always a good answer or a great answer, but they will have a rookie quarterback that they convince Jefferson to stick around with. Or they will have another Kirk Cousins who, maybe the next Kirk Cousins is, here's a prediction that we'll go back to in 3 years. Maybe it's Desmond Ridder. And, he's decent in Atlanta, but they don't have success. And then we bring him in here, and we do it all again. And everybody hates him, but some people love him. And we kind of say, look, we got this guy now. So, sign on. I think he'll stay a Viking, but I still like that take. I still love that take.
Yeah, it's a little bit weaker than I had initially thought, but the idea holds insofar as Jefferson wants to win. I think that's clear.
Yeah.
And I don't think our staff would allow Jefferson to basically walk or even be traded without getting the most out of his career. I mean, it would be a colossal mistake to let arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL at age 23 leave. It would be crazy. You have to be able to maximize what you have in a generational talent.
Yeah.
This isn't just, he's really good. It's he's literally one of the best receivers in franchise history that had Randy Moss and Chris Carter. So it's very much a position for the Vikings to, put their chips in the basket of, okay, now is the time to go. In these next few years, when Jefferson is still ascending, we've got to go.
Yeah.
And you can't waste that opportunity. So I would like to say, as the kids say, or I like that sign at the NFL draft said, let Kwesi cook and let him go about and get the right quarterback, whether that's Cousins or somebody else. to throw Jefferson the ball and keep him happy because he's too good. He's too good to waste.
This is I quickly do want to point out because I feel like this has been a negative show, man. I mean, Dalvin Cook's gone, Danielle's holding out. We'll talk about Jefferson probably holding out. I mean, like, this has been a negative show. Jordan Addison is apparently going to be better than Justin Jefferson. I mean, you listen to these reports that came out of minicamp, and he's the best to ever touch a football. I mean, legitimately, he is very impressive, and he is impressing the coaching staff. He's impressing his teammates. And he's impressing, the people that have gotten to see him play. And I think Dustin said when he was on that he held, his guy, we'll just leave it at that. His guy said that he's held buzz like this out of minicamp about, like, who was it? It was Percy Halvin. It was Adrian Peterson. And there might have been another name on there, and I can't remember who it was. But that's a pretty good list of two that I just listed. So he's generating that kind of buzz, and he's never, in his entire rookie season, I would guess, going to get the other team's cornerback number one. Or get double teamed. In the entire season, I don't think he'll see it because of Jefferson and what threat he poses. So it's going to be a lot of one-on-ones that that could be deadly, and that could be potent, and that could be better than, Adam Thielen. Wish him all the best in Carolina. He was an aging wide receiver. He had lost a step. His advanced metrics against man coverage were bad, like really bad. And so having young legs, young first round USC legs, I can get behind it. So there is some positives there. I have a quick question for you, because now I'm just going to right back to negativity. And this is a fun game. Do you have a price for Justin Jefferson today? Is there a price? Is there an amount of draft picks or a player that you could realistically, like, maybe not realistically, but like, what would it take? Would it be Pat Mahomes? Would it be like Mahomes for Jefferson straight up? We'll do it.
I think Mahomes is more valuable, and I don't think that's a question. Just because Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league by a wide margin, and he plays the position that is the most important in the league.
All right, let me change the hypothetical. 2 first-round picks and T. Higgins for Justin Jefferson from the Cincinnati Bengals. Do you make that trade?
No, I would not make that trade.
All right. What if both first-round picks were this upcoming draft? They make a trade and they go get, like, 2 2024 draft picks in the first round and T. Higgins. Oh, man, God, that's a tough one.
I would consider it because T. Higgins is very good.
He's very good.
I would
not
consider
better,
it.
You get you got to wonder if you hit on those. Yeah, man, I love these hypotheticals.
I would need to know what Jordan Addison can do, because it's way too important to have good receivers. And so if Addison ends up being a bust and you're sort of living and dying by TJ Hawkinson and KJ Osborne, no matter who your quarterback is, if you use those hypothetical first-round picks to package and go get Caleb Williams, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
And so, I guess I would say if Caleb Williams is the guy you end up drafting, he could potentially be the future franchise quarterback and, carry the team for the next 15 years. So that's another thing to think about. But I would think long and hard about it, and I would need to know what I had in Jordan Addison first.
I want to pencil in, if there's no, this is a big if, but if there was no extension for Jefferson by week 1, I would like to pencil in this will be a late season discussion, a bye week, so, towards the end of the season, a bye week discussion about would you trade Justin Jefferson for a guaranteed Caleb Williams and let's say T. Higgins. Like, let's say a proven wide receiver and guaranteed Caleb Williams. Would you trade Justin Jefferson for that? And I think we'll know by then what Jordan Addison is. Not that you can't make a leap.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun discussion. We'll forget about it.
I think it'd be interesting. And just so we're clear, Jefferson's not holding out. We talked about the idea of him, like missing OTAs. That's totally voluntary. You don't have to go to that. He was at the mandatory part. He said very clearly that he is going to be at training camp. So there's no holdout here from Justin Jefferson. But like you said, if there's no contract, it's an interesting discussion to have.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say about him, and I think I made this comment a while back. The thing with Justin Jefferson that can't be overstated is how generationally good he is. And these guys don't just come around once in a while. Like in the league, the only guy that really rivals him in terms of, recent generational talent at the wide receiver position is Jamar Chase. I don't know who else you could really talk about. I think him and Jefferson, Chase and Jefferson are, relatively equal in a lot of ways. I'm not going to get into the whole ranking receivers thing, but in terms of guys who came out at similar times, it's those guys and there's nobody else.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to think long and hard about before you trade him because of what you would be losing. You're not just losing a good player. You are losing a great, great player if that ever happened.
Yeah. I will very quickly give my final thoughts. Make sure that you shop Unified and you follow Will at Will Bad Blues. Check out the Bad Loser blog and also check out Mothership, I think is a good phrase for it, I guess. I don't know. Let's call it that. Check out VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com for wonderful Vikings news and speculation and all that kind of stuff. We got training camp coming up. We got preseason coming. I mean, it's going to sneak up on us, but it has been nice enjoying some golf and enjoying some baseball and getting ready for the birth of my first child, which is going to be exciting. And so, I don't know exactly what the schedule looks like in the future. We will discuss that. I mean, we'll be back. I don't think we're going anywhere. And so, yeah, I'm going to leave it on this because this was a pretty negative show, and that kind of sucks. But I think I think Jefferson is a Viking until Adam Thielen's out. I'm sorry, I had to bend over and pick something up. I think that he will be a Viking for a very long time. I think he'll sign an extension here. I think he'll stay here. Cousins or no Cousins, I think he's just that good. He'll make a quarterback a lot better than they are. And if the Vikings do get lucky and land someone who is really good already, they could be cooking with, gasoline for a while. So, we probably spent a little bit too much time, and that's my fault, playing the hypothetical trade games and stuff like that.
It's fun.
I love hypotheticals. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, all right, that's all I have. I'll pass it off to you for final thoughts, and we'll get out of the people's hail.
Sweet. Last thing I'll say is I am going to be back fully writing for the website. It's been a while since I've actually put out content. I'm going to be having a KJ Osborne piece coming out here in the next few days. One of my favorite Vikings. He's just fun to cover. He's got a lot of maturity about him, the way he carries himself, and he's an interesting dude, and he's easy to root for. So I'm going to have a piece coming out on him, hopefully in the next few days. And after that, hopefully my work at Bad Loser blog and Vikings Territory is going to start rolling up again. So keep an eye out for those things. But again, until next time, this is Will and Jordan signing off. We will be back maybe if there's a Danielle Hunter breaking news sometime soon. If not, we will come back as soon as we're ready after Jordan's baby is born. We'll bring you the most important Vikings news as soon as we can.
I will go from the hospital if we trade Danielle Hunter.
Absolutely.
I'm ready for that.
All right, everybody. This is Load the Box signing off. Skol, y'all.